For 7 seasons, Wings made us laugh with its quirky pilots and chaotic airport crew. But once the cameras stopped rolling, their lives veered into places darker than any episode of the show. From painful divorces to shocking disappearances from Hollywood, we're about to reveal everything the series never showed you, and you will be shocked to know the truth behind it. Rebecca Schull as Faye Evelyn Cochran. Rebecca Schull was born on February 22, 1929, in New York City, New York. At 61 years old, she played Faye Cochran, the gentle, sharp-witted ticket agent who quietly grounded Wings in 1990. Her steady warmth shaped all 7 seasons. But behind that calm image was a marriage entering its hardest chapter. Rebecca's husband, Gene Schull, had supported her since 1951, yet his health collapsed just as her career entered a new peak. While filming Crimes and Misdemeanors and later Analyze This, she spent her days on set and her nights helping Gene walk, breathe, and endure constant medical care. The emotional strain turned every performance into an effort to hold herself together while the person she loved was slipping away. And after Gene's death in 2008, the toll finally broke through her body. Grief became fatigue, sleeplessness turned into slow movement, and age amplified every weakness. Filming United 93 and Suits demanded far more strength than she had left, and each role carried a heaviness shaped by loss. Today, at 96 years old, Rebecca Schull lives quietly in New York, surrounded by her family and appearing at Wings fan events when her health allows. Her estimated net worth of about $1.5 million reflects a lifetime of steady, disciplined work. David Schramm as Roy Biggins. David Schramm was born on August 14, 1946, in Louisville, Kentucky. At 44 years old, he played Roy Biggins, the loud, blustery airline owner who became one of the defining comedic forces of Wings, 1990 to 1997. His booming voice and theatrical precision made Roy unforgettable. But long before television recognized him, his life had already been shaped by hardship. Growing up in a household shadowed by instability and a father who worked as a bookie, Schramm learned early how unpredictable and harsh life could be. Acting became his escape, the one place where chaos turned into structure. That determination pushed him toward standout roles in The Dreamer of Oz and Miami Vice, performances built on the emotional intensity he carried from a difficult upbringing. As years passed, the same intensity that made him brilliant began to break his body down. His voice started to deteriorate, costing him roles he had spent decades training for. Soon after came dizziness, shortness of breath, and a weakening heart that limited even simple movements. The physical damage accumulated quietly until each performance he could no longer keep pace. Sadly, on March 28, 2020, at the age of 73, David Schramm died in New York City from a heart attack complicated by a fall, a sharp, unexpected end to a life built entirely on discipline and artistry. His estimated net worth of about $1 to $1.5 million reflected decades of dedicated theater work rather than celebrity extravagance. Amy Yasbeck as Casey Chapel Davenport. Amy Yasbeck was born on September 12, 1962, in Blue Ash, Ohio. At 32 years old, she played Casey Chapel Davenport, the elegant, sharp-tongued love interest who joined Wings, 1995 to 1997. Her character added a new mix of charm and chaos to Nantucket's airport. But behind the humor on screen, her marriage carried the heaviest tragedy of the entire cast. Amy married actor John Ritter in 1999, and for a few brief years they lived a joyful, almost fairy tale life raising their daughter Stella. But in 2003, during a rehearsal day on 8 Simple Rules, John suddenly collapsed from an undiagnosed aortic dissection. At 10:48 p.m., he was gone. The shock hit Amy like a physical blow when she forced to explain death to a 5-year-old child. From that moment on, grief shaped every corner of her life. Depression followed, deep and paralyzing, pushing her to step away from leading roles and focus entirely on survival. Yet from the devastation came a fierce purpose. She sued the hospital, won millions, and used that money to build the John Ritter Foundation, saving countless lives through heart disease awareness. She worked only occasionally. Pretty Woman, The Mask, Robin Hood, Men in Tights. But her real work became charity, mentoring young actors and rebuilding a life that had collapsed overnight. Today, at 63 years old, Amy lives quietly while continuing her advocacy work. She rarely appears on screen, choosing instead to attend charity events, speak about heart health education, and join Wings fan conventions when she feels ready. With an estimated net worth of around $12 million, mostly from the settlement and John Ritter's estate, she has turned tragedy into a mission that honors the man she lost and the daughter she raised alone. Farrah Forke as Alex Lambert. Farrah Forke was born on January 12, 1968, in Corpus Christi, Texas. At 24 years old, she played Alex Lambert, the confident, magnetic female pilot introduced in Season 4 of Wings, 1992. Though she appeared in only 35 episodes, Alex became one of the show's most beloved characters. But away from the cameras, her life was marked by battles far harsher than anything written for television. After early success in Lois and Clark and Dweebs, she began facing intense pressure from Hollywood. Constant expectations, image demands, and a demanding career that allowed no room to breathe. When she became a mother to twin boys, Chuck and Whit, she made a difficult, heartbreaking decision. She left Los Angeles at her peak and returned to Texas, choosing motherhood over fame. Soon after, an even darker struggle began. Farrah spent years battling cancer, a long, painful fight that drained her strength and forced her into a completely private life. She refused publicity, refused attention, and refused to let the world watch her decline. Her acting work slowed to a halt, limited to voice roles like Big Barda in Justice League Unlimited, recorded during brief periods of strength. Tragically, Farrah Forke died on February 25, 2022, at her home in the Woodlands, Texas, at just 54 years old, after a long battle with cancer. She left behind 2 young sons and an estate valued at around $800,000 to $1 million, a modest sum for a woman who once stood on the edge of major Hollywood stardom. Tim Daly as Joe Hackett. Tim Daly was born on March 1, 1956, in Manhattan, New York. At 34 years old, he played Joe Hackett, the responsible, disciplined owner of Sandpiper Air and Wings, 1990 to 1997. His calm, grounded presence shaped the show's emotional core, but behind that steady image was a personal life filled with painful fractures. Tim married actress Amy Van Nostrand in 1982, and for nearly 3 decades they tried to keep their family stable. Yet the constant imbalance between work and home slowly eroded their marriage. After 2 children and countless attempts to fix what was breaking, the relationship collapsed in 2010. And just as he was rebuilding emotionally, he entered a high-profile relationship with Téa Leoni, a love that lasted a decade but ended quietly in 2024. Through it all, he clung to work. Private Practice, Superman, the animated series, and later Madam Secretary, where he delivered one of his most acclaimed performances. Then came the physical pain that changed everything. In 2000, while piloting a small plane, Tim experienced engine failure and was forced into a terrifying emergency landing, one wrong move away from death. Years later, in 2019, a skiing accident shattered both of his legs, leading to multiple surgeries and nearly 2 years of recovery. Yet he pushed forward, through grueling physical therapy, through exhaustion, through fear, and slowly reclaimed his life as he continued his nonprofit work with the Creative Coalition. Today, at 69 years old, Tim Daly remains active in film and social advocacy. He works, mentors, campaigns for the arts, and keeps flying despite what nearly took him down. With an estimated net worth of $10 million, he lives with the quiet resilience of someone who has survived emotional heartbreak, physical trauma, and the pressure of a lifetime spent in the public eye. Steven Weber as Brian Hackett. Steven Weber was born on March 4, 1961, in Queens, New York. At 29 years old, he played Brian Hackett, the reckless, charming, womanizing pilot who electrified Wings, 1990 to 1997. He was the perfect foil to his brother Joe, turning chaos into comedy with every scene he touched. His energy became one of the defining signatures of the show. Yet outside of sitcom laughter, Steven's first marriage to actress Finn Carter collapsed in 1991, the pressures of young fame and unstable schedules pulling them apart. His second marriage to journalist Juliette Honan began beautifully in 1995, blessed with 2 sons, but years of industry stress, career shifts, and emotional distance eventually fractured the relationship. Their 2013 divorce was long, exhausting, and emotionally draining. He buried himself in work: The Shining, Studio 60, iZombie, NCIS New Orleans, trying to outrun the silence that followed. But emotional pain soon collided with addiction. In the 2000s, Steven spiraled into alcohol dependence, using it to quiet anxiety and loneliness. The habit clouded his work, strained friendships, and pulled him toward a dangerous edge. When depression followed, he was forced into a reckoning. Slowly, painfully, he recovered. Today, at 64 years old, Steven Weber stars as Dr. Dean Archer on Chicago Med, one of his strongest roles in years. He also reunited joyfully with Tim Daly for the Wings reunion in 2023. With a net worth of around $6 million, he now lives quietly, focusing on work, fatherhood, and sobriety. Thomas Haden Church as Lowell Mather. Thomas Haden Church was born on June 17, 1960, in Woodland, California. At 30 years old, he played Lowell Mather, the slow-witted but lovable mechanic on Wings, 1990 to 1995. His 6-season performance made Lowell one of the most memorable characters in the entire series. By season 6, he left the show to chase bigger dreams in film. For years in Hollywood, Thomas entered a long relationship with actress Mia Zottoli, and together they welcomed their daughter Cody in 2004. Yet fame, distance, and the emotional weight of career pressure slowly strained the relationship until it ended quietly and permanently. While separation was the public word, the truth was harsher. He retreated into solitude, choosing isolation over another attempt at love. That emotional distance grew into a lifestyle. Thomas moved to a 2,000-acre ranch in Texas, becoming almost completely reclusive. He avoided interviews, turned down major roles, and disappeared for long stretches of time. When injuries from ranch work and years of exhaustion began affecting his health, he simply withdrew even further, living with chronic aches he rarely spoke about. At 65 years old in 2025, Thomas lives quietly on his ranch, appearing in Hollywood only when a script truly moves him. With an estimated net worth of $20 million, he maintains a life of deliberate silence, far removed from Lowell Mather's innocent chatter, and seems to have chosen peace over the noise of fame. Crystal Bernard as Helen Chapel Hackett. Crystal Bernard was born on September 30th, 1961, in Garland, Texas. At 29 years old, she played Helen Chapel Hackett, the feisty lunch counter worker and aspiring cellist who became Joe Hackett's great love in Wings, 1990 to 1997. Through 172 episodes, she became the emotional center of the show's romantic storyline. Away from the set, however, Crystal lived a life filled with quiet struggles that few ever saw. Her strict evangelical upbringing shaped everything, from her relationships to her career choices. She dated well-known figures like Billy Dean and Peter Cetera, but every relationship ended before reaching permanence. This inner conflict intensified when she declined major roles, including one connected to a Friends spin-off. As the emotional exhaustion grew, Crystal began to pull back from Hollywood. By the early 2000s, she had already stopped accepting major projects, turning down scripts that conflicted with her faith or asked too much of her private life. Even as her music career produced highlights like I Wanna Take Forever Tonight, the pressure of fame wore her down. Years of spiritual stress and industry expectations led to long periods of isolation, and she quietly disappeared from public view. Today, at 64 years old, Crystal Bernard lives a devoted private life in Los Angeles, rarely making public appearances. She surfaced briefly for the Wings reunion in 2024, offering fans a rare glimpse of the woman they once watched every week. With an estimated net worth of $5 million, she spends her time in faith, family, and quiet reflection. Tony Shalhoub as Antonio Scarpacci. Tony Shalhoub was born on October 9, 1953, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. At 38 years old, he joined Wings in 1992 as Antonio Scarpacci, the shy, hopelessly romantic Italian taxi driver. His soft-spoken charm and comedic precision made Antonio one of the most beloved characters of the entire series. Stepping away from Wings, Tony found stability in the one place Hollywood rarely offers: marriage. He married actress Brooke Adams in 1992, and together they built a family by adopting two daughters, Josie and Sophie. Their bond remained strong even as Brooke faced a frightening battle with breast cancer. Through every role, from Galaxy Quest to Big Night, he returned home to the same steady partnership that had carried him since the early 1990s. But stability did not spare him from pain. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, Tony and Brooke were both struck by severe COVID-19. For weeks, the illness left them exhausted, breathless, and uncertain of recovery. Recovering from that ordeal changed him, deepening the emotional intensity he later brought to Mr. Monk's Last Case and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, roles that earned him yet another Primetime Emmy. Now, at 72 years old, Tony Shalhoub remains one of the most decorated actors from the Wings cast, with a net worth of around $20 million. He continues to work selectively, choosing roles that speak to him, while living a quiet, committed life with Brooke, who stood beside him before the Emmys, before the Golden Globes, before the fame that could never shake the foundation of their family. Brian Haley as Bud Bronski. As her career grew, her health began to quietly collapse. Years of portraying Dr. Carrie Weaver's limp caused her spine to curve, triggering chronic pain that worsened each season. The damage became so real that writers eventually wove her surgery into the storyline. Today, at 72 years old, Laura Innes continues to work selectively, focusing mainly on directing and family-centered projects. Her estimated net worth is around $1 million, built from decades of acting, directing, and long-term residuals from E.R. William Hickey as Carlton Blanchard. William Hickey was born on September 19, 1928, in Brooklyn, New York. At 67 years old, he appeared on Wings between 1995 and 1996 as Carlton Blanchard, the bizarre, raspy-voiced older man whose offbeat humor and oddball trivia made every scene unpredictably funny. His voice alone could turn a simple line into comedy. But the eccentric performances hid a life marked by loneliness. William never married, choosing instead a long, quiet companionship with jewelry designer Lily Offen, who stayed by his side through decades of career highs and personal lows. He lived alone in a tiny Greenwich Village apartment packed with books, scripts, and memories from vanished Broadway eras. While the world admired him for roles like Don Corrado Prizzi in Prizzi's Honor, 1985, earning him an Academy Award nomination, William spent his private life wrestling with alcoholism and the emotional scars of a poverty-stricken childhood that had shaped his hardened exterior. As time went on, his lifelong addictions came with a brutal price. Heavy smoking from youth destroyed his lungs, causing chronic emphysema by the 1970s. His breathing worsened year after year, forcing him to carry portable oxygen and decline many roles he wanted to take. The physical decline triggered bouts of depression, especially as the theater world shifted toward younger performers. He survived by teaching at HB Studio, shaping the talents of actors who later became stars, Robert De Niro among them. Sadly, William Hickey died on June 29, 1997, at Beth Israel Hospital in New York City at 69 years old from complications of emphysema and bronchitis. His net worth at the time of his passing was about $1 million, earned from decades of theater, film, and teaching. Mark Harelik as Davis Lynch. Mark Harelik was born on June 5, 1951, in Hamilton, Texas. At 44 years old, he appeared in Wings, 1995 to 1997, as Davis Lynch, a quirky, soft-spoken friend of Lowell who added gentle humor to the final seasons. His grounded, understated comedic timing became a calm counterpoint to the chaos around him, turning Davis into a quiet fan favorite. But behind that calm presence were early wounds he rarely spoke about. Growing up as the only Jewish family in a small Texas town left Mark feeling isolated, often bullied for his heritage. Instead of quitting, he poured his pain into writing, even during periods when acting roles were scarce and finances in the 2000s grew increasingly tight. After years devoted to theater, he met actress Spencer Caden, marrying her in 2004 in a relationship built on creativity, humor, and mutual respect. Their biggest joy arrived with the birth of their son, Haskell Ace, around 2008. A moment Mark once described as, "A miracle my childhood never promised me." Though the industry grew unpredictable, he balanced family life with teaching, playwriting, and taking supporting roles in Grey's Anatomy, Breaking Bad, Prison Break, and later Preacher, slowly rebuilding both confidence and income. Now, at 74 years old, Mark Harelik remains active, healthy, and as quietly dedicated as ever. He continues writing, teaching, and acting while living peacefully with his wife and son in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth of $3 million reflects decades of steady theater work, television appearances, and the enduring success of The Immigrant. Mitchell Ryan as Jonathan Clayton. Mitchell Ryan was born on January 11, 1934, in Cincinnati, Ohio. At 61 years old, he portrayed Jonathan Clayton, Helen's stern, intimidating father, whose brief appearances carried a surprising emotional weight in Wings, 1995 to 1997. His authoritative voice and commanding presence turned every scene into something unforgettable. Yet off-screen, his life was shaped by battles far darker than any role he played. His first marriage to Linda Morse collapsed under the strain of alcoholism that had followed him since the 1960s, even costing him his role on Dark Shadows. Although his second marriage to Barbara Albertine eventually brought stability, he still faced the constant fear of relapse. As time passed, his health suffered from the damage left behind by decades of heavy drinking and smoking. Heart complications forced him to slow down, and roles he once took with ease became too demanding. Sadly, Mitchell Ryan passed away from heart failure on March 4, 2022, at his home in Los Angeles, at the age of 88. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was $2 million, earned from a long and prolific career in film and television. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Wings cast. Who should we cover next? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more then and now revelations.